Hello, you guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Take 30 podcast. My guest today is Miss Nicole. So how are you doing today?
Hi, I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show. So I always like to ask my guests this question, and I ask every single one of my guests. So tell me something challenging that's happened in the last few weeks or something you learned in the last few weeks. And it can be anything. A book you read, article that you read, or even something that you saw on TV.
Yeah, thank you for that. So I like to listen to audiobooks, and right now I'm listening to Breath by James Nestor. Mm-hmm. And it's all about how typically we breathe improperly. Most people breathe out of their mouth, and I had been breathing through my mouth for my whole life. But we're actually supposed to be breathing through our nose. And it turns out that habitual mouth breathing can actually cause a ton of different health problems, including cavities, not digesting food properly, overeating, hypertension. So some of these symptoms that I was having, like having cavities, even though I brush my teeth and floss twice daily, things like not absorbing nutrients from my food properly, that was all traced back to breathing through my mouth. So the past couple of weeks since going through this book, I've been training myself to breathe through my nose, which is difficult if, you're unconscious or subconsciously not thinking about it.
Right.
And I've had to tape my mouth closed while I'm sleeping to actually retrain myself to breathe properly.
That is interesting, actually. I think a lot of people do breathe out from their mouths. That's interesting, and that causes cavities.
Yeah, it actually impacts all sorts of things. It changes the structure of the mouth. It changes the chemistry of the mouth. It impacts the metabolic rate of the body, how much or how little we're digesting the food, how much or how little we're absorbing oxygen. It has all kinds of health implications.
Oh, wow. That's interesting to learn. I definitely have to check it out. What was the book called again?
It's called Breathe. I think it's Breathe or Breath. Let me double check that because now I don't want to misquote it. I want to say it was Breath. See, I was wrong. Breath. Breath by James Nestor.
Breath by James Nestor. Yeah. Ooh, I definitely have to check it out. There's so many books that I have to check out and read the audio. Well, listen to the audio books because sometimes I don't even get a chance to actually have the physical book copy of the book with me. Sometimes I'm just I don't even get a chance to read it. So it's listening to audiobooks I find is more helpful because it's like a podcast, really. You can listen to it in the car when you're going to work, especially if you don't have that downtime to just have the physical copy in your hands.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So just go ahead and tell us just a little bit about yourself, your background.
Yes, thank you. So I'm a psychic empath, quantum energy healer, spiritual mentor, and life coach. And what I do is I show people how to tune into their intuition and use their spiritual gifts to create their dream life, whether that's having better health or manifesting more love or more money. I help people to get into alignment with their true calling.
Ooh, that's amazing. So you did say that you're a life coach. So just tell us just a little bit about how you got into your journey towards life coach. What kind of inspired you to go into coaching?
Yeah, so I spent much of my life hiding from who I really was, and I knew in my early 20s that something needed to shift. I thought I was doing everything right, go to school, get good grades, get a good job, but that just wasn't the path for me. I had a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, a lot of chronic illness. And so I started on a personal growth journey of doing affirmations and mindset work. And as I got deeper into this, I started being drawn towards other coaches and healers. At the time, I was a virtual assistant working online, supporting other business owners. And as I got to be behind the scenes and supporting them in that way, I really felt inspired to start leading and facilitating those types of sessions myself. So I got trained in life coaching, got a certification, and that led to all sorts of other trainings and certifications, including psychic intuition, quantum energy healing, some different healing modalities. But for me, it's very much about bringing people into alignment with who they are, why they're here, and why that matters.
That's amazing. Yeah. And I think, one of the things that I guess society teaches us, right, is that there's only one path through life, and there isn't, right? And there's so many different paths that you can take, whether that's you becoming an entrepreneur, you becoming a life coach, or whatever it is your calling is. It's so important to like follow your passions. And I like the way I love what you do. And I've interviewed a lot of life coaches, and they were telling me the same thing. It's like, wow, that is amazing. And it's all a matter about mindset, tapping into your mindset when it comes to entrepreneurship or life coaching as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So I always give my listeners advice, like as far as entrepreneurship, it's important to just really start that business that you say you were going to do, and kind of follow your passion. So entrepreneurship, I will say it is hard, as I'm a podcaster myself, looking to eventually do this full time. And I will say, like, some people don't know where to start. So like, what advice would you have for someone who, may want to start a business, but, they're lost. They don't know where to start.
Yeah, well, you touched on one of the pieces, which is just getting started, even if it feels scary or it feels like you're not ready, because you're never going to be
fully ready.
Yeah, you're never going to be fully ready. There's never a perfect time. There's always going to be some reason or some excuse not to do it. Like, oh, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough energy. I don't have enough money. And those are just excuses. That's just the world's way of trying to keep you small and keep you from shining your light. So that would be my first piece of advice, is to just feel the fear and to do it anyway. Mm-hmm. And the other thing that's coming through is, just because something is difficult or challenging or it's not moving quickly doesn't mean that it's not working. There's often a lot of things happening behind the scenes that we don't see that are making moves towards our desired outcome in our ideal reality. Like, I'm thinking of right now, I have a Facebook group. It's about a little over 1,000 people in this group. There's mm-hmm. people that I know in the group, and then there's mm-hmm. people that don't know. And sometimes they are watching quietly what right. you're doing and what you're coming out with and what you're saying and what you're presenting. And then when they're ready, they seem to just pop out of nowhere. But right. you would never have an opportunity to connect with those people if you weren't doing what you feel called to do, if you weren't shining your light.
Right. I agree. And I think, in our heads, especially, as podcasters, you're thinking that nobody's listening, right? But in reality, there is people that are listening, and there's people that, are listening to your show and are inspired to do what you say, do their business or do whatever it is that they're passionate about. And it's all a matter of like taking that leap of faith and just going for it. And that's usually the advice that I give a lot of my listeners, especially when they want to start podcasts. And I always or if they want to start their own, whatever it is that they want to start, their own business, let's say, or their own side hustle, let's say. Thank you. So I was reading a little bit about reading your blog actually yesterday. Okay, so you have I know you said I was reading here that you were talking about your struggle with depression. Do you mind talking a little bit about it? And you actually did mention in your blog 5 ways to treat depression naturally.
Yeah. So my experience with mental health issues goes back quite early in childhood, because I discovered when I was 9 that I would have prophetic dreams and visions. So I would see things and then they would actually happen. And I grew up in an environment where these kinds of things were not really talked about. And when they were, it was frowned upon. And so I felt like I couldn't be my authentic self. And I also felt like I couldn't control what was happening to me or the outcomes that I was seeing. So I just ended up having a lot of anxiety, which led to depression. And it just seemed to get worse over the years. And when I had that wake-up call in my early 20s of I actually ended up in the ER with a panic attack, that's what led me to personal growth and development. That helped me quite a bit as far as managing my anxiety and my depression. But as the years went on, I realized that I still wasn't quite hitting on what I was here to do on this earth. Mm-hmm. And I got to be in a really dark place, and everything hurt. My eyeballs hurt, all my joints hurt, and I just wanted the pain to stop. And I didn't realize at the time that I was what's called an empath, meaning that I can feel other people's energy. Mm-hmm. So at the time, it's just like everything hurt, and I just wanted to stop. And it was very clear. It was like a voice came in that said, don't stop, keep going. There's purpose in the pain. And I knew in that moment that everything that I had been going through was to help other people through similar situations so that they wouldn't have to suffer and feel as much pain in the way that I had. So that was a really huge inspiration for what I do now as a psychic empath, quantum energy healer, spiritual mentor, and life coach, is showing people how to develop their skills and abilities so that they can use them to their advantage and have it be a blessing and not a burden.
Not a burden. I love that. I love your story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And one of the things that anxiety, because like I struggle with social anxiety, and I have my whole life as well. And I have talked about this in, a few episodes back, and I have said it in multiple podcast episodes as well. So one of the, it wasn't until like last year I made the decision to seek therapy, but anxiety and depression was never talked about as when we were younger, and when my parents were like, in their when they were kids. And so mental health was really a stigma. And, I think it's what I do like now is that a lot of people are talking about it and sharing their stories. And so like that's like really what this podcast is about. And I knew like, there's somebody out there that's struggling with depression and anxiety, or, social anxiety. And, I think it's amazing like how far we've come in 2023. But there is still work to be done. And I think just by, everybody talking about, their struggles, we would be able to break the stigma.
Exactly.
Yeah. So my last question for you is, everyone is talking about self-care. I wanted to know how you define self-care and what self-care activities do you incorporate in your everyday life?
That's a beautiful question. So for me, self-care is a nourishment of all aspects of self. A lot of self-care focuses on the body, but for me, it's the mind, body, soul, and emotions. So all aspects of self. And it's not just something that we put on our to-do list that we get to check off later. It really has to have meaning and intention behind it. So if my self-care practices shift and change day to day, depending on how I'm feeling, depending on what's going on that day, depending on what my mind, body, soul, and emotions are asking for. So there's a couple of things that stay pretty consistent, but then everything else shifts and transforms. So the things that are consistent are, I like to take a ritual shower, which means I'm visualizing the water washing away all of the energy that's no longer serving me, anything that's not mine that I don't want to take into the day. And then once I feel like that's clean and clear, I allow the water to bring in wealth, prosperity, abundance. This is when I do my affirmation. So I'm calling it in using the water as a way for guiding that. And the other thing that's pretty consistent for me is I actually switched off of coffee a few months ago. So now I take rasa, which is a mushroom alternative to coffee. It's an adaptogenic, so it works with the body rather than getting in this self-feeding cycle of like the caffeine crash that leads to needing more caffeine, and then you can't sleep, which means you need more caffeine. So I found that also really helped with the stress anxiety response as well, being more calm and even and level-headed. So those two practices are pretty consistent, but then everything else can change, like whether or not I meditate or whether or not I journal or whether or not I go for a walk. These can all vary depending on what's needed. So something that I'm constantly asking myself is, what does my mind need right now? What does my body need right now? What does my soul need right now? And I ask myself these questions, and then whatever comes through, I trust that that's what is being called for, and then I go ahead and do that.
I love that. Yeah. And I think, self-care kind of looks different for everybody. For me personally, I love a good meditation, especially in the mornings. So like I go on YouTube and I put on a mindfulness meditation, practice. So, I usually do that in the morning. So it's like 5 minutes throughout my day. And I take 5 minutes, if that's all the time I have, to meditate. And sometimes I go a little bit more than just 5 minutes. I'll do like a 10-minute meditation. I'm able to now do 10 minutes. So meditation, and for me, mindfulness meditation, it did take me a little while to get into, but once I started small by just doing like 2 minutes out of my day, I increased from 2 minutes to 5 minutes and from 5 minutes to 10 minutes. So it's like, it really depends on, what you need. And then another thing for me, I like to do, is journal. I love journaling. Journaling just gets my thoughts on just a piece of paper and pencil, or piece of paper and pen, I should say. And I just write down my thoughts, like everything that I'm going through in this moment, and just looking at it on a piece of paper or pencil, like it helps me say, okay, how can I like if I have all these, let's say, a negative mindset for today, right? How can I shift it into a more positive one? So those are questions that I'll ask myself. Another thing, if it depends on the day, I love a good yoga session. I love to do a good yoga session. Yoga helps me calm, especially the nervous system. Or I'll go, like, if I'm really feeling it, I'll even go for a walk or a run, depending on what I feel that day. So like self-care kind of just looks different for everyone. Yeah. Well, thank you, Nicole, for coming on the show and chatting with me. Please let everyone know where they can find you on social media, on your website, wherever they can find you.
Thank you. So you can find me online at oracleacademy.com. It's a little play on words between aura and oracle, AURACLE, academy.com. You can also find me on Instagram as Nicole.Starbuck. That's Nicole, little dot in the middle, followed by my last name, like the coffee, but without the S at the end. And then I also have a complimentary container free Facebook group called The Conscious Collective.
All right. Well, thank you, Nicole, again for coming on the show. All right, you guys. So that is it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for coming on and tuning in and listening. If you guys want to follow the Take 30 podcast, you can follow the Instagram. It's at the Take 30 podcast. You can also follow your girl, your host, on her personal Instagram page. It's at Holloway_Erykah99. And we are on Facebook. It's the Take 30 podcast. You can search me on Facebook, and you can also search me on threads.net. Same handle, the Take 30 podcast. And I am also on TikTok. I have so many social media that sometimes it's so hard to keep up, but it's at, Take 30 with Erykah. So I'll link all of my socials down on in the show notes below, so you guys can go ahead and check them out. All right. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in and listening, and I'll talk to you guys in the next episode. Bye, guys.